Hello and welcome. You found the Social Work Podcast. My name's Jonathan Singer, and I'll be your host as we explore all things social work. Hey there, podcast listeners. Jonathan here. In today's episode of the Social Work Podcast, we're talking about the rapidly evolving landscape of social work. Today, my guest is Dr. Anthony Estreet, CEO of the National Association of Social Workers. I spoke with Dr. Estreet on the last day of the 2025 NASW National Conference in Chicago, Illinois. We talked about what he saw as some of the most pressing issues shaping the future of social work. In this interview, Dr. Estreet talks about the rapid evolution of artificial intelligence, which is one of my favorite topics, and its implications for social work practice. We discuss the possibilities that AI offers, as well as the critical need for social workers to be at the table to ensure ethical use, protect against bias, and ensure that AI complements rather than replaces human connection. Dr. Estreet talks about NASW's efforts to update the Code of Ethics and develop practice guidelines to include AI. Now, during this part of our conversation, Dr. Estreet mentions an Illinois law that would prohibit AI from being marketed as a standalone therapist. When I published this episode on July 13th, the bill, HB 1806, Wellness and Oversight for Psychological Resources Act, was awaiting Governor Pritzker's signature, but there's no indication that he would not sign it. Dr. Estreet and I also talk about the urgent need for social workers to organize and advocate in the current political climate, particularly in the face of policies challenging diversity, equity, and inclusion, which Dr. Estreet calls the heartbeat of the profession. We discuss the power of collective voice and action at both state and national levels. We talk about the Social Work Interstate Compact, which Dr. Estreet describes as a major game changer for the profession. Dr. Estreet talks about how the compact will allow social workers to practice across state lines with a single license, enhance mobility, expanding access to mental health services, and addressing shortages in underserved areas. And in addition to the good, we also talk about some of the challenges with the compact, including the fact that at the moment, the only way a state can meet the Interstate Compact requirement for a national exam is to use the ASWB exam. And because Dr. Estreet mentions it, if you want to learn more about the ASWB pass rate controversies, check out episode 133 of the Social Work Podcast, where I talk with NASW Illinois CEO Joel Rubin about how NASW Illinois led the charge to eliminate the requirement that graduates of accredited Illinois BSW and MSW programs had to take the ASWB exam to be licensed. Also, while I have your attention, shout out to Joel and his team at NASW Illinois for doing a great job with the 2025 National Conference. And finally, we'll hear about NASW's renewed vision for the organization, symbolized by its new logo and its commitment to deep listening, inclusivity, responsiveness, and meeting the diverse needs of its members. I really enjoyed this conversation with Dr. Estreet, and I hope you do too. Now, during the interview, you'll hear Dr. Estreet reference yesterday's session or this morning's session. And while that made perfect sense in the moment, I owe you a little bit of context. Again, I was interviewing Dr. Estreet at the 2025 conference. We were in an empty hotel meeting room, publicists silently sitting off the side, conference was winding up, and we were just having a conversation. So the AI session that he was referring to was the opening plenary on Tuesday, June 17th, called Artificial Intelligence and Social Work, The Road Ahead, with Dr. Lori Goldkind, Rachel Dekas, Eric Rice, Juan Rios, and Jamie Sandoval. He also mentions my opening plenary, which happened the morning of the interview, and it was called The Growing Role of Social Media, Implications for Social Work. And I had the honor to be joined by panelists Monika Thomas, Lashana Alfred, and Christian Ace Stetler. And now, without further ado, on to episode 146 of the Social Work Podcast, The Evolving Landscape of Social Work Practice, Technology, Advocacy, and the Interstate Compact, with NASW CEO Dr. Anthony Estreet. Dr. Estreet, thank you so much for being here on the Social Work Podcast.
Thank you for having me. I think this is an important conversation, especially as we look to the current political climate, but just also the future of social work. It's a changing landscape and it's ever evolving and things are happening really fast.
Absolutely. So speaking of the evolving nature of social work, what are some of the things that are on the horizon? What are some trends? What are some things that you're seeing that social workers should know about?
Oh man, off the rip, I would probably say the future of AI and what that looks like in terms of social work. I am a person that grew up in the early Terminator days, and so it is very interesting, but also very frightening to see how fast AI is evolving. But I think the other part of it too, it's also very curious to see how AI is evolving and how we can come up with different ways to help advance the field, but also to leverage the benefits of AI for social work practice. And what I mean by that is I was at this symposium at the National Academy of Medicine, and they gave this example of AI and digital health and what it can look like. And they're really talking about physical health. They gave this example of how they utilize AI to scour thousands of scientific journals to come up with a solution for a non-traditional presentation of a disorder, and they were able to treat a young kid. And so that right there is like the possibilities and hope of innovation around artificial intelligence. At the same time, we've also seen instances where people have used AI or AI has been used and it has falsely identified or shown bias when it comes to like facial recognition and police profiling and things like that. So there's a lot of space for social workers to get involved in how it's evolving. But I think the other part of it too, and this is what I talked about at the National Academy of Medicine, is making sure that social workers are at the table so that we're not using artificial intelligence to replace social workers, but to be a benefit to social workers. And we also have to catch up with the science and make sure that we are making sure policy is protecting social workers, making sure there's ethics and boundaries protecting how we use AI and what it looks like. Illinois just passed a very interesting bill that has made it illegal for AI chatbots to be marketed as therapists. But what it also does is it provides protection to clients. It makes, if you're going to use AI in your mental health practice, you have to have consent of the client to use it. And so that is what I'm talking about in terms of innovation, in terms of the workforce, but also how we can move the profession alongside of how fast AI is growing.
I love that. Well, and so many of the things that you just talked about, the idea of protecting the profession, right? And also understanding the innovation and the possibilities that come along with it. What is NASW National's role in that?
Yeah, and so the first iteration of it is certainly being on this symposium with the National Academy of Medicine. I was the only representative of a non-physical health organization, and so I certainly brought in the voice of behavioral health. With social workers being the largest providers of behavioral health, it's important to carry that voice forward. I think the next iteration of it is really thinking about how do we create an AI task force within the profession that really is going to help guide what the next steps are in terms of ethics, how social workers should interact, practice guides. During your presentation today, you talked about the guidelines that we have around social work and technology. So we need to look at social work and technology and update that to include artificial intelligence and how social workers can engage with this technology.
And I love what you're saying, which is that one of the roles of the national office is to say we have guidelines, we have standards, we have expectations. The code of ethics, for example, which we know hasn't been revised since generative AI really jumped on the scene. And so it sounds like these are some of the things that are going to be coming down the pike that social workers need to know about and that NASW is going to kind of be leading the charge on.
Yeah, and I think that it gives us the opportunity to also be more innovative, right? I think that, within our social work ecosystem, within the NASW ecosystem, we have a lot of experts that can guide this. And I think that it's reaching out to experts across the profession and kind of getting their input because they're going to bring different perspectives. I think about you, I think about Desmond Patton, I think about Juan Rios, who are really doing some innovative things around like the future of social work, futurism, but also how you're leveraging the use of AI to do some creative things, or even around creating pictures. I think in the conversation yesterday around artificial intelligence, Dr. Rios talked about working with young kids and using AI to create images of them graduating. Now, how powerful is that for a kid that did not see themselves graduating, to see themselves in a picture that is generated that they can then hang up on their wall, and it creates a goal for them that they may not have been able to imagine for themselves. And so that's how we use AI to help the community, how we help individuals, and how we leverage it within the therapeutic relationships that we have.
So many possibilities. I could talk about this part of the future all day. I'm curious if we can pivot a little bit to talk about the role of social work organizations in addressing issues of social justice during this current administration, where we have seen policies that have pushed back against so many of the things that social work has embedded in educational accreditation standards, code of ethics, things like that.
Yeah, and so I think this is a great time for social workers to organize. We had a session today. It was really powerful around the importance of coalition building, right? And so we had HRC, Color of Change, the Democratic National Convention, and the Chicago Teachers Union all on the same stage talking about how are we organizing members and what are some opportunities for us to leverage those strategic partnerships to advocate on behalf of our members. And I think that, when we think about the current administration, it can seem very daunting because so much is happening so fast. It is designed to be that way. And I think as social workers, sometimes it feels overwhelming. I would argue, and I would certainly encourage social workers to get involved, and don't put your head in the sand, but to actually connect with your local chapter, connect with your organization. Anything that you feel passionate about, find a way to advocate. Sometimes we get caught in that trap of, as a social worker, I'm a micro social worker or a macro social worker, right? And I think this is the opportunity for us to be a social worker, period, hard stop. And that means understanding the role of policy. It means understanding how advocacy works. It means understanding that a lot of these executive orders that are coming out are going to impact not only the profession and social workers, but also the communities that we serve. And so when we're talking about, executive orders that remove diversity, equity, and inclusion from our accredited standards, that is literally the heartbeat of the profession. You cannot talk about social work without talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is literally ingrained in every part of our profession. And so you can have as many executive orders as you want. That's not going to get rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And despite all of that, your executive orders is not making America less diverse. And so I think social workers have to really get into this space of advocacy and really understanding their role and the power of their voice. As CEO of NASW, I know it is my opportunity and my job to advocate for more membership. At the same time, I also want to remind people that if you're waiting for an organization to save you, then you've already missed it. The power of NASW is the power of its members and how we use our collective voice to create change in every state that we're a part of.
So would you say to folks who are listening to this who want to get in there and do something, who are like, what can we do now? Would you recommend that they go to their state chapter, or are there committees and opportunities to get involved at the national level that they should be aware of?
I would always say start with your state chapter. The state chapters are the heartbeat of the association. And the one thing that I will say is that in this political landscape, there are certainly things happening at the federal level that we are addressing. But the closer the election is to you personally, meaning your home state, the more it's going to impact you. And so when we talk about the removal of DEI and book bans, that doesn't come from a federal executive order. That comes from a decision that your school board makes. And that is something that you can effectuate change with, right? And so run for school boards. If people are not voting the way you want to, do voting cards that show their history and get people to engage. I often say, educate, advocate, and activate. And it really came, that last one, activate, came from Michelle Obama at the DNC. She said, do something. And so as we're getting involved in this work, it's not just enough for me to sit here and say it. I need to bring 2, 3, 10 people alongside me to advocate for this thing that we care about. And so in my wildest dreams, it would be 800,000 social workers advocating for more diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice in this space, right? Imagine the power that we can have in command and Congress if we can all get behind a unified voice around the things that we need to do for social work.
So one of the things that started well before this current administration was the Interstate Compact. And I know NASW has played a big role in that. Could you talk a little bit about what the compact is and where it is now and where it's heading?
Yeah, so the Interstate Compact is really a game changer for the profession. It is going to allow social workers to practice across state lines with a single license as long as they're part of a compact state. And so what does that mean for social workers? It means that when, we have the things such as the North Carolina flooding or the LA wildfires, and they call on social workers to respond, we don't have to go through that barrier of not having a license in that state or waiting for a state of emergency to be declared by the governor in order for social workers to come in and work. It means that if California becomes a compact state, that any social worker that is part of a compact can then go and offer services, whether it's pro bono, sliding scale, or whatever. So it creates more of a mobility and a portability for social workers to evolve their practice, but also to expand the scope of mental health practice in states that are underserved or may have a shortage of social workers, right? And so right now, we passed the compact legislation in February 2023. We are the fastest growing compact according to the Council of State Governors, and we currently have about 30 states signed on. To be fair, because I also like to set expectations, there are some states out there that are just not compact friendly, and they're never going to sign the compact, which is okay. That means we still have over half of our states right now have signed on, right? And so we're moving right along. I think the other part of it too is really understanding that there is a nuance, right? And so I like to operate in transparency. In the current iteration of the compact, it does state that you have to pass a national qualifying examination. What that means is that if you want to participate in the compact, that you will have to pass the ASWB exam in order to practice in that and to be a part of that compact. And so I tell people all the time, had the compact came out at a different time than the exam rates, people would be celebrating the compact, right? But it happened at the same time, and we have to make sure that we are addressing both at the same time.
Well, and I think that's an important piece because there was a lot of pushback about the ASW pass rates, issues around whether or not it was fair. And I know that some states, like for example, Illinois, right, got rid of the requirement that folks that graduate from accredited MSW programs have to pass a licensure exam. You still have to pass the licensure exam to get the LCSW or do an additional 3,000 hour, which is a lot of time and energy.
Right.
But having a national conversation about the role of the ASWB exam specifically or alternatives, I do think is an important piece for all the reasons that you mentioned, that there's a lot of benefits to having an interstate compact. What are some of the downsides that social workers should be aware of that maybe they can mobilize for or be prepared for?
In regards to the exam?
The interstate compact.
Yeah, and so I think, as we're thinking about the Interstate Compact, we're certainly working with the Compact Commission to set up and establish those rules. Dr. KG out of Minnesota, the Executive Director of Minnesota, leads our licensing task force, and is our representative on the Compact Commission. And so what it looks like is understanding how the compact is going to impact social work practice, particularly in those states that have less than favorable laws that support the communities that we serve, right? And so the question always comes up, if I'm a social worker in Maryland and I am seeing a client in Mississippi, could Mississippi, because of their laws, then come after me in Maryland? And I think that's a real conversation that we need to have and better understanding. I think the challenge is we're not the first profession with the compact, nor are we going to be the last one, right? And so there's ways to look at how other professions have done this. And so we're doing the research to understand what that looks like. I think we have to calm down as a profession. And I mean that in the most respectful way, because sometimes we get caught up in the online rhetoric around this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and instead of doing the research and understanding what that's going to look like, right? I think when we talk about the compact and when we talk about the examination, we have to leave room for critical dialogue to understand both sides of this argument and see where we're going to land at, right? Because again, and I will say this till I'm blue in the face, social workers are going to solve the issues within the profession. When other people outside the profession start to try to solve those issues, it creates chaos. I've seen it and it's not great, right? And so the more that we look at and understand how the compact and some of the states with more restrictive laws are going to impact social workers, the better we'll be able to understand it and guide social workers, right? Because the other part of it too of the compact is just because you're able to practice in another state does not mean that you're absolved from understanding the laws in that state. And so as a practice part of it and as part of workforce development, when you become part of the compact, you're responsible for not only understanding the laws in your state, but understanding the laws of the states that you're also working into. So there is a burden of responsibility on that social worker to understand how to practice and what the practice standards are of that state. And so there's going to be a lot of training opportunities to make sure social workers understand that. And so that also means understanding the laws that they have on their book.
And so the Interstate Compact requires a certain number of states to sign on before it goes into effect. What is that number?
In order for us to stand up the commission, we needed 7 states to sign the compact legislation. And so we got that. The compact commission is established. And fingers crossed, we're going to hope to see the first iteration of the compact application in early to mid 26.
Okay. So it is happening.
It is happening. It is happening. And I am excited. Long time coming.
So one of the things that I was excited to see was the new logo. Does that portend, does that sort of signal a new vision for NASW, a new sort of direction for the organization?
Absolutely. You know, I think, and I've been in this role for 2.5 years, and I've been doing a lot of deep listening to members, to non-members, to people that wanted to let me know their thoughts on NASW. I think one of the things that has been very clear is that people don't necessarily understand NASW, and that NASW has a responsibility to meet people where they are, but also to create an opportunity that is inclusive, that is listening and much more responsive to the needs of not only our members, but the profession, right? One of the questions I get asked a lot is what is the benefit of NASW, right? And as I've been in this role, it's understanding that NASW can't be everything to everybody. And I think that we have to say that NASW is going to focus on these areas, and then we can create partnerships and coalitions to focus on these other areas. For me, the biggest benefit of NASW is that we engage in advocacy at every level. And so when we think about social work safety, when we think about advocating for higher pay, when we think about mental health services for the communities that we serve, those are the things that we really do really well, right? And I think that when we get into these other spaces around how do people become involved, I think that is the opportunity for change. And so when we think about what is the benefit of an NASW membership, we have to answer that question based on who's asking. So whether you're a student member, whether you are a new professional, mid-career, or retired professional, that answer is going to be differently, right? And everybody's going to have their different needs for NASW. I think the other part of it too is in listening to members and non-members, we have to do something about the cost of membership and come up with different tier options, right? And so that people can become much more involved, but also answer that call of making it more accessible for the profession. One of the things that I have been looking at, and we are certainly trying to pilot test, is what it would look like for the Netflix model, as I call it. What does a monthly payment plan look like for people in terms of membership? Because again, $200 and something is a lot for a membership, right? All at once. But if I can pay over time, it might be better and it might not be that big of a burden. I know for me, Netflix has probably increased my rate so many times. I know what I started when I got Netflix, but what I'm paying now, I don't know, because it literally it's something that I see as a value. I use it when I want to. I mean, I'm good at binge watching something on a good Saturday, right? And so as we think about, how NASW is showing up, it really is trying to meet members and non-members where they are and creating opportunities for engagement, but also for deeper dialogue around what the social work profession needs.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and catching us up to date on what's going on with NASW. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me, and I look forward to another episode of your podcast and making sure that we get some drumming going on.
You got it. Thank you.
All right.
I'm Jonathan Singer, and thanks for being with me today for another episode of the Social Work Podcast. If you missed an episode or have suggestions for future episodes, please visit socialworkpodcast.com. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit our online store at cafepress.com/swpodcast. To all the social workers out there, keep up the good work. We'll see you next time at the Social Work Podcast.